September 2000. Picture a boardroom in Dallas, Texas. The founders of a tiny DVD by mail startup are sitting across from a $6 billion corporate empire. Now, this startup, Netflix, was bleeding cash. They were on track to lose $50 million that year alone. They even chartered Vanna White's private jet for $20,000, money they definitely could not afford, just to make this one meeting happen. Their pitch to Blockbuster's CEO, John Antioco, was actually pretty simple. Buy us out for $50 million. Blockbuster takes the physical stores and we'll run the digital side. Now, according to legend, the room literally laughed him out. But what almost every version of this famous story completely skips over is that Blockbuster's general counsel, a guy named Ed Stead, flatly told the Netflix founders that their entire online rental model would never work. The entire room just rejected the future. So how exactly does a tiny startup completely defeat a $6 billion global empire, a company that operated more than 9,000 stores? Well, we have to look closely at the data, because that famous 2000 rejection story, it's a massive red herring. Calling Blockbuster too dumb to see it coming is honestly the laziest explanation in modern business history. It completely ignores the actual structural, psychological, and financial mechanics of Blockbuster's collapse. And, on the flip side, it ignores the brilliant hidden machinery behind Netflix's rise.
Part 1. The addiction to bad profits.
To truly understand how this empire fell apart, we have to look at how their core revenue model was fundamentally misaligned with consumer psychology. You see, Blockbuster wasn't just in the movie business. Back in the year 2000, they extracted a staggering $800 million in late fees from their customers. That was roughly 16% of their entire revenue. But structurally, this was a massive psychological betrayal. Think about how that felt for you as a customer. You knew they got you. It built this deep, unshakable resentment. The very mechanism making Blockbuster so highly profitable was simultaneously destroying their customer trust and loyalty.
And Netflix? They saw that exact consumer hostility and built a business model explicitly designed to exploit it. When they launched their subscription-based DVD by mail service, their original ad campaign was incredibly simple: the end of late fees. By offering a flat monthly fee for a fixed number of movies, they entirely sidestepped the single biggest pain point in the traditional retail market. Customers never felt punished, and that fundamentally shifted the psychology of home entertainment.
Part 2. The invisible analytics weapon.
But here's the thing. Eliminating late penalties was only the surface-level disruption. The true engine of Netflix's growth was an invisible algorithmic architecture that completely separated them from traditional retail competitors. Netflix engineered what we call the growth flywheel. From day one, they embedded analytics right at their core. Using their Cinematch algorithm, Netflix tracked user watch histories and ratings to predict exactly what a customer would want to see next. This personalized content discovery kept subscribers heavily engaged, and high engagement reduced churn. Lower churn meant a higher customer lifetime value, creating these predictable recurring cash flows that Netflix could then aggressively reinvest into streaming infrastructure and eventually original content. It was an unstoppable, self-reinforcing cycle.
Now, contrast that with the incumbent. Blockbuster relied entirely on legacy retail metrics. We're talking same-store sales, foot traffic on a Friday night, and of course, late fee revenues. These measures offered short-term snapshots of transactions, sure, but they provided absolutely zero predictive insight into evolving consumer behavior. Blockbuster was essentially flying blind. They lacked the proactive, data-driven strategy you actually need to model long-term retention.
And as you'll see here, this brilliantly illustrates the real-world consequence of that blindness. Just look at the devastating divergence in these churn rates. Through analytics and personalized recommendations, Netflix steadily drove its churn rate down to 30%. Meanwhile, as consumer expectations started to shift, Blockbuster's churn rate skyrocketed from roughly 10 to 15% in the early 2000s, all the way up to an unrecoverable 67% by 2010. Nearly 2/3 of Blockbuster's subscribers were abandoning them every single year. You simply cannot outmarket that kind of attrition.
Part 3. The War from Within. Now here is the massive twist that completely shatters the myth of Blockbuster as this clueless, slow-moving dinosaur. CEO John Antioco actually saw the threat. He understood it, and he built the perfect counterattack. Let's fast forward to 2007. Blockbuster launched a program called Total Access. Customers could rent a movie online, have it mailed to their house, and then return it in person to a physical store and instantly get a new DVD for free. It heavily leveraged their massive physical footprint to offer a speed of exchange that Netflix simply couldn't match. And the crazy part? It worked. Blockbuster rapidly gained over 2 million subscribers. Internally, Netflix executives were genuinely terrified, later admitting that total access was an existential threat. Blockbuster had the right plan.
So what actually killed it? Well, it was a civil war from within. Roughly 20% of Blockbuster stores were owned by franchisees. These were regular people who had sunk their life savings into a storefront lease. When corporate launched Total Access, allowing customers to rent from the couch and never step foot in a store, the franchisees correctly saw this digital pivot as a direct threat to their livelihoods. Success for the corporate digital strategy meant absolute ruin for the local franchisee relying on foot traffic.
The company that needed to embrace the future was built to protect the past. The franchises fought back, and they fought back hard, creating massive internal friction. This right here is the psychological reality of the innovator's dilemma. Blockbuster was literally at war with itself. The people running the stores desperately needed customers to keep walking through the doors, while corporate needed them to go online. The very internal structure and incentive system that made Blockbuster a global empire in the first place was exactly what paralyzed them from fully committing to the digital fix.
Part 4. The fatal boardroom sabotage. But franchise pushback wasn't even the final blow. The true cause of Blockbuster's death was a vicious boardroom power struggle. You see, building Total Access and eliminating those highly lucrative late fees was incredibly expensive. It cost the company hundreds of millions. The stock price took a hit, and that drew the attention of activist investor Carl Icahn. Icahn bought a large stake, took a board seat, and immediately clashed with CEO John Antioco over the spending. Now, Antioco had a severance clause guaranteeing him around $54 million if he was fired without cause. So instead of firing him, Icahn made the CEO's life so utterly difficult with relentless boardroom goddles that Antioco eventually agreed to resign voluntarily for a vastly reduced buyout of roughly $8 million.
And the tragic, cinematic irony here is just profound. Years later, Carl Icahn admitted on the record, Total Access might have actually saved the company. The billionaire who orchestrated this boardroom coup publicly stated that John Antioco's strategy might have worked if it had just been allowed to keep growing. Think about that. Blockbuster wasn't killed by a bad decision in a 2000 meeting. It was killed by a 2007 bonus dispute.
To replace Antioco, the board brought in Jim Keyes. He was a former 7-Eleven executive with absolutely no streaming or digital strategy background, and Keyes immediately set about dismantling the future. He slashed the marketing budget for Total Access, he raised prices on the digital subscribers, and incredibly, he reinstated the exact same hated late fees that Blockbuster had just spent $200 million trying to eliminate. Online subscriber growth just collapsed overnight.
That sabotage was fatal. Weighed down by massive debt and the 2008 financial crisis, Blockbuster's rigid physical overhead was just impossible to sustain anymore. By 2010, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And, in a final, ultimate humiliation, the remnants of the $6 billion empire were auctioned off to Dish Network for a mere $320 million, which, staggeringly, was less than what it had cost Blockbuster to build the very digital platform that their own board had abandoned.
Part 5. The psychology of disruption.
The story of this disruption carries one final, truly shocking twist regarding the man history so unfairly blames for missing the Netflix wave in the first place. When John Antioco was pushed out of Blockbuster in 2007, he quietly sold off his Blockbuster shares. And what did he do with that money? He bought Netflix stock, right around $20 a share. The CEO, who was supposedly too dumb to see the future, personally profited immensely off the success of Netflix, just watching quietly from the sidelines as the replacement leadership burned his former company to the ground.
Understanding the future and being able to act on it are two completely different problems. Blockbuster had all the right information. They knew DVDs were replacing VHS. They knew subscriptions were replacing late fees. They even proved they knew how to build a digital platform that terrified Netflix. But strategic vision is entirely useless if an organization's internal incentive structure, franchise model, and boardroom politics just refuse to execute it.
And this leaves us with a stark reality for any modern business facing technological change today. Innovation isn't just about coming up with a smart new product, it requires immense organizational courage. If your company discovers a new model that threatens your core revenue, you really only have a choice. You can either bravely cannibalize your own past, or you can wait for a tiny focused startup to do it for you. So ask yourself, when your industry's digital shift arrives, which side of history will you choose to be on?